Let's talk about nullable types or null safety in Dart language. So we saw that whenever we declare a variable, for example, I'm declaring a variable of type integer, and whenever we declare a variable, uh, at the same time we need to assign a value. Okay, so if we don't assign a value and if we keep it like this, we can actually not putting any value inside x, and it is not showing any error right now. What it is showing is some kind of warning that the value of the local variable x isn't used. So I have defined a variable x, but it has not been used. So if you declare the same variable, or if you declare another variable outside of the main function, for example, or maybe inside a class, for example int y, and if I keep it like that, then it will definitely show an error, and it says that the non-nullable variable, and this term is very important, the non-nullable variable y must be initialized, because I cannot just put a variable like this. When I declare a variable, I must have to put some value inside that variable. But here inside the function, it's not showing any error, because a function is subject to call, because whenever this code is compiled, this code will not be executed unless the main function is called. So inside a function body for local variables, it will not throw any error at the first time, but whenever you try to use this variable, for example, if I now okay, let me just remove this line. So if I now try to print the value of x, I think now the compiler should show an error, and it says the same, maybe almost the same thing, that the non-nullable local variable x must be assigned before it can be used. So it is letting me to declare a variable without any assignment, but whenever I am trying to use that variable, it is saying that I cannot use this variable unless I assign a valid value inside it. Now if I assign anything, for example 10 or any valid integer value, now we know that we can actually print the value of x. But if you come from a Java background, you probably know that in Java we can assign a null value inside any variable. In Java we can do that, but in programming language like Dart and Kotlin we cannot do that, because by default all Dart variables are non-nullable, because we cannot just simply assign a null value inside a variable. I mean any type of variable, whatever type of variable you declare, that are non-nullable by default. So there is a turnaround. I mean, if you really want to assign null to a value to a variable, all you can do is you can actually put a question mark sign just after the variable, the data type, and then you can actually assign null. So it is not an error, it is saying something like an information. It says the redundant initialization to null. That means I don't have to assign null explicitly, because Dart will actually treat this x variable as a nullable, and in fact I can declare a variable outside of the function at the root level or file level, maybe string and nullable something called name. So in this case you see that there is no error, because whenever I put a question mark just after the data type name, then Dart will treat this variable as a nullable. That means I can assign null or I can assign string. Okay, so what does nullable actually mean? Nullable means that I have created a reference that should point a memory address, but currently this reference isn't pointing to any memory address, and that's why it is null. And in our program, at some situation we might have to declare variables with nullable types for optional fields in the function or class parameters. Whenever we have some values that these values are mandatory, we must pass this value, but some parameters should be nullable, or make optional, we can declare variables as nullable. Okay, so now let's focus on how we actually handle the nullable type variable. Now if I want to print the value x, for example print x, it will, what it will say, it will simply saying nothing. If you remember that whenever we didn't use this nullable sign, it was showing an error, and now I'm using this question mark. Now this is no error, there is no error. So if I now run this application, now let's see what kind of output we see. So we get a null. So dot actually put a default null value to this x variable. So far so good. We can actually print a null value, we know that. Now if I want to add some utility method or property after this x object or reference, for example, if I want to know if this x variable or this x is an even or odd number, so let's call the method or property is even. And whenever I'm trying to call this even, which is actually a getter property, and now the compiler is showing an error, and it says that the property is even cannot be unconditionally accessed because the receiver, that means the x, can be null. So this is the very common situation whenever we have a nullable variable, and whenever we try to access the properties or methods of that nullable object, we get this error because this can be null, and if it is null, so there is no point of accessing this reference or the reference that the memory address that this x is pointing. So to remove this error, or to make this code runnable, all we have to do is we can use two separate solution. And if you see this error pane over here, Dart is trying to say something, some sort of solution, and the solution is try making the access conditional, or adding the null check to the target. So it is telling us to use either to use this or this operators. So let's use this, which is actually a null safety operator. So if I now just put a question mark and then dot, and then we call is even, now the error is gone, and if I press run, and the output will be null. So what is going on here? It is simply Dart is actually checking whether this x variable is null or not. So if x is null, then this is even getter will not be called, and the value null will be printed. And now, for example, if I assign a value like 10, and now if I run this application, and then you will see that we'll be able to see the value of is even, that is a boolean that is returned by is even. So this operator, that means question mark and dot, a null safety operator, it is actually working like a if else conditions, right? So if I want to show the same output, if I want to show you the same output using if else, then I might be writing like this. So if x is equals null, then print simply null, or if it is not null, then just print the x dot then is even. Okay, so this line of code and this one will show the same output. So you can treat this expression as a replacement of if else. So this question mark and dot is really doing the job of if else. So this is like a null safety operator. So we can actually safely call the is even or any getter or property or method after a nullable object. There is also a solution that we can use by using the this exclamatory sign, this operator. So this is actually called a null assertion operator. So we can actually use that, and you see that there is no error. That means we can run the application. And if I run now, you will see that we get sorry, we don't get any error because it is able to dot actually call this is even function because we actually assigned a value. For example, let us remove the assigned value. So now we know that this x is actually null because we didn't put any value. Now if I run this application, and let's see carefully to the console, it says that uncaught type error, and it says something like cannot read properties of null. So we know by ourselves that we didn't assign any value, and we use this exclamatory sign. This is called the null assertion symbol or operator instead of null safety operator. And Dart actually didn't give any complaint or error. There was no compilation error, and it seemed like we are okay to go or run the application. But whenever we did run our application, the error is thrown. So what is the purpose of this exclamatory sign or this operator? So by putting this operator, we are actually telling or trying to tell Dart that it can actually safely call this is even property over this nullable object. So Dart, in this case, Dart will not check whether this value is null or not. It will simply call this is even function on the basis of our commitment, or we are actually passing a not null assertion. That means we are assuring Dart that this cannot be null, so you can safely call this getter method. So Dart is calling whatever we provided, the information we provided. On the basis of that Dart actually calling this function, and eventually the error is thrown. So it is like something like a suicide, right? So we are assuring Dart that there is no problem, you can call this function, but we know that we didn't assign any values to x, and now we are eventually we are letting this program to be crashed or throw exception by ourselves, by our mistake. So you might be thinking that then this operator is very risky to use, but trust me, we even need this operator because sometimes we know that we have assigned or we have assigned a value to a nullable property, and in Flutter you will see this a lot when we actually start building Flutter application, and there is a widget called text widget, and that text widget takes a mandatory string parameter, and that string must not be null. But sometimes we have some properties of nullable properties, and that text widget must not accept any nullable value. So in that case we have to provide this operator. Otherwise we should not use this operator, or we should use this operator on if and only if we know that this x, though it is nullable, but it cannot be null because we have already provided a valid value for this variable. So we can only use this property when we are 100% confirmed and 100% sure that this is not null. So these are some operators that we can use for a nullable property, and there are some other proper operators regarding to null safety, and we will see that operators when we actually build Flutter application, and we'll see those operators in action in live projects. So for now, all you have to remember is by default Dart variables are non-nullable, and if you want to turn a variable to nullable, all you have to do is put a question mark just after the type name, and in this situation you must have to provide the type. You cannot use var or final instead of the actual data type. So you must have to provide the actual data type if you want to declare a nullable variable. And whenever you want to use that nullable variable, you have to use either the null safety operator or the null not null assertion operator.